The idea of minimum wage is foolish. The easiest way to debunk this is to say, okay, you say it should be a $15 minimum wage. I'll agree with you. I say it should be a $2,000 minimum wage. $2,000 an hour. Why not? These people have money in the back room, right? They've got that Scrooge McDuck money bin. We know that they're gypping people. We know that they've got this money hanging around. Where are you coming up with this $15 an hour number? I mean, is it straight from your colon, or does it pass through the small intestine first? Like, what? You know, the problem with the minimum wage is that, for the left, every argument is a moral argument, not an economic argument, so you have to take the morality of the argument away. It is beyond that, there is a fundamental argument here. It is fundamentally immoral for you to come in and tell somebody that they are not allowed to make a free and binding contract. Okay, no one is being chained to their grill. If somebody doesn't want to work for that wage, they can leave. Right? And who are you to tell the 17-year-old black kid who wants to work for $7.50 an hour that he is forbidden by law from taking a job at $7.50 an hour? Who are you to do that? Right? This makes you a totalitarian. It's a totalitarian rule. So that's the way I would argue against it.
Thank you, sir.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ben Shapiro is somebody who always saying how the left is radical, right? And how radical and extremism is a bad thing. Well, here he's trying to fight an argument of moderation with an argument of radicalism and extremism.
The idea of minimum wage is foolish. The idea of minimum wage is foolish. The easiest way to debunk this is to say, okay, you say it should be a $15 minimum wage. I'll agree with you. I say it should be a $2,000 minimum wage. $2,000 an hour. Why not?
This is Ben Shapiro's argument. He's saying that the easiest way to defeat an argument of moderation is to counter it with an argument of radicalism. That is literally what he says to bring to the table in a minimum wage debate. This doesn't even make any sense.
Why not?
So let's say if you had a roommate and your roommate tells you not to park at the edge of the driveway because they need to get out of the driveway so they can go to work. Would you respond to them by saying, well, why don't I park in a completely different state? No.
Why not?
Because that's off the topic. You're being outlandish and outrageous when you say things like that. So if you go over to somebody's house for breakfast and you want a cup of coffee, and they fill up the damn tub with coffee, you're going to look at them like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You can't bring up $2,000 an hour in a $15 an hour minimum wage debate.
Why not?
It has no place in that argument. Why not $2,000 an hour? Because I didn't ask for $2,000 an hour. It wouldn't make sense to ask for $2,000 an hour. But for many companies, $15 an hour is something they can do. That may not be the solution for every company, obviously. So what you would have to implement is a system, a wage structure system, brackets. So once you cross over a certain threshold, be it the amount of money that a company makes in profits versus the amount of employees that it has, there are dozens of different ways to establish thresholds for wages. So that we understand that companies like Amazon, who can't afford to pay their employees $15 an hour, should not be bringing people in at $7.50. You have to cover their living expenses when the company that they work for doesn't pay them enough to do so. I thought you were against socialism. Your argument is pushing people into social safety nets when you have a minimum wage that does not keep up with inflation or productivity. That's the argument. You can't approach that argument, so you have to mischaracterize and bring straw men to the table. Minimum wage argument is based off of a cost of living argument. It has nothing to do with morality or Scrooge McDuck or gold coins and rainbows and none of this other childish, cartoonish bullshit you just brought to the table.
The people who are suggesting minimum wage don't know anything about business or economics, and minimum wage invariably... Minimum wage is supposed to be an economic decision, but it's predicated largely on a moral vision of the world that is false. And that is that somewhere these business people who are engaged in competition with each other with ever shrinking profit margins, somewhere the McDonald's owner in his back room has a giant Scrooge McDuck money bin filled with gold. And each night he goes there and he just swims around in it, right? And he's preventing all of his hard laborers who are flipping burgers from earning their rightful $200,000 a year. And so we need a minimum wage. The point, the problem with minimum wage, and the reason it's economically ignorant, is because competition in wages leads to lower wages, right? That's what it does. Just as competition in products leads to lower prices for the products. You artificially increasing the price of labor, all that does is it cuts out the profit margin, and it means that somebody is going to have to be fired, right? This is every time minimum wage is tried, there is if you get rid of the confounds, there is a net loss in employment because, as we all know, if you only have $30 to spend on your employees, and right now you're paying them each $10 a head, if you'd raise that to $15 a head, you have to lay somebody off, right? Somebody has to get fired. Beyond that, it's pushing up the unemployment rate, particularly among the people who need those part-time jobs and those low-wage jobs. The people who disproportionately staff part-time and low-wage jobs are young minority folks, right? And those people, their unemployment rate is soaring right now because if I'm going to pay $15 an hour for a burger flipper, he also better be able to recite cons. I mean, he better have another skill set, right? Because it turns out that anybody with a functioning radial bone and a prefrontal cortex can flip a burger. It's not that hard a job, right? It's an entry-level job. Which isn't to say it's not. It is honorable to work, but let's not pretend that you're curing cancer here, right? Which is the reason why people who actually try to cure cancer get paid more. So the idea of minimum wage is foolish. The easiest way to debunk this is to say, okay, you say it should be a $15 minimum wage. I'll agree with you. It should be. I say it should be a $2,000 minimum wage, $2,000 an hour. Why not?
The low skills, low wages argument, the most pathetic argument I've probably ever heard in my lifetime. Okay, no, I get you. Low skills, low wages, right? Well, let's look at that. If you need a cashier at McDonald's, you're not going to hire an astronaut or a lawyer or a doctor to work as a cashier at McDonald's. But let's say you did. Let's say you hired Ben Shapiro to be your cashier at McDonald's. Imagine Ben Shapiro in his McDonald's uniform, with his pants all pulled up to his nipples, with a hand-me-down belt, McDonald's visor cap, and his little earpiece so he can get the drive-through orders while he's at the front register. Let's say Ben Shapiro's working at McDonald's. Do you know what he's going to do on his first day of training as a cashier? He's going to look like every other human being. He's going to look like a doofus pressing buttons on the terminal to try to figure out how to ring it in order until he understands how to operate that system. That's called training. And once he is trained for that job, he can perform that function that has that specific value to that specific company. If you are a paleontologist or if you work for NASA, then the skills that you have that would be useful to NASA or useful in the field as a paleontologist or a biologist are of no use to McDonald's. So it's not about low skills, low wages. The argument is that the skills that are applied to that job that facilitate that industry should be paid exactly what they are worth in relevance to the operation and function of that company. That is the argument. And if you are in conditions that support $10 an hour, the only way that they will go up to $15 an hour is if you had conditions that would support $15 an hour. And that's where the argument for increasing the minimum wage comes from. It's not an artificial increase.